Hi everyone, and first off, I just wanted to thank you for coming to this session. I'm so excited that you are continuing to tune into this content. My name is Becc Holland. I'm the head of sales development at Chorus.ai. And Trish, who are you?
I am Trish Bertuzzi, and I'm the CEO of the Bridge Group.
So in this session, we wanted to cover takeaways on how to have a great cold conversation right off the bat. So without further ado, why don't we cut into the first takeaway?
One of the challenges I see on a regular basis is that when you're an SDR or an AE and you're making a lot of calls in a sequence, because you're grouping your activities together, that you tend to get caught up in the mind numbingness of leaving voicemails or clicking buttons or whatever the case may be. So what happens is then your buyer actually answers the phone and people are like, oh, I'm humming up, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my first takeaway would be to be prepared, be emotionally prepared by being present in that someone will answer the phone at one of these point in times, and also know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
Winging it when you're being interruptive is never a good thing.
I think that's really important. I think it's really interesting that you bring up that we're making so many cold calls and that we almost see them as just a cadence or a sequence, but we don't see them as an actual person on the end of the line.
You gotta be human.
Yeah.
That is the biggest competitive differentiator that I see among companies. People are always training their SDRs and AEs how to position against the competition.
Yeah.
You know what? At the end of the day, all of our products are the same. We have one feature, then they catch up, then they have a feature, then we catch up. So what is the biggest competitive differentiator? It's our people, and being human is what I think helps you rise above the noise of all the other people that are calling that same potential buyer.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I read that Google did a study on basically how you read emails, and you start at 2 o'clock and you go clockwise. So basically what it teaches you is at the end of your the first line of like the reason for your outreach and the CTA, people read that before they read your value prop. So what it can tell you is that our value props are actually the least significant piece of our outreach. I think that we need to get away from the mindset that we just are dialing, and think about the other person on the line. That actually leads into really well into my first takeaway, is taking human cues from the buyer on the other end of the line of like, okay, we're surprised once they, hopefully not surprised once they pick up. And it's like when we're having a conversation, what I mean by taking human cues of, I've seen SDRs and account executives on the line and they're like, hey Trish, this is Becc calling on a recorded line, of course, how have you been? And they're like, good. And they're like, great, well, my value prop is blank. Yeah. And they're not, like, everything in that response is telling me that you're not okay, but I'm going to skate past it and go right into my pitch. So I think being human can be a really important piece of that call and make them not see you as a cold caller and see you as an actual human being.
Yeah. Well, you got to be careful, though, because you don't want to end up being someone's therapist. You don't want to end up saying, if they go, good, oh, what's wrong?
Yeah.
But, I think you do have to take your human cue from them, set your tone, set the pace of your language. Yeah. And I don't know, people show a little enthusiasm. Yeah. Be excited about the fact that you're actually having a conversation with someone who, and this is another takeaway, you want to help them build a better business, right? If you don't want to help your buyers build a better business, you just want to sell them shit, all right, whatever. Not interesting to them, not interesting to you. But if you really are passionate about how you can help them and what you can bring to the table for them, I think it's going to come through in your conversation.
Yeah, I think it comes through naturally. It's like when I know the person that I'm calling into, if I've done research on their business, I'm almost fanning out a little when they pick up of like, oh, I know Trisha's book, I know Trisha's business, I've seen Trisha's sessions, and so I'm like, okay, I'm excited to have a conversation with you because I know your business, and so I like the reason for my outreach is much more compelling than like, okay, I want to sell you software. It's, I saw this thing in your video, and I have an idea of how I could speed that up for you, and I think it helps you with a lot more conviction.
Yeah, I totally agree. You want to be sure that you're having a conversation and it's a business-based conversation. And to do that, you need to have a foundation of information at your fingertips.
Yeah, so don't they all kind of link in together of like, if I'm getting this right, of like, be prepared by doing research, know your buyer on the other end of the line. Why do you think knowing your buyer is so paramount to having a good cold call?
Well, let me give you an example of what happens to me probably only a couple times a day, because I don't get that many phone calls, because I think people aren't using the phone enough anymore. Different topic. But here's what happens. I answer the phone, and I always answer my phone. Trish Bertuzzi, they're like, hey, Trish, this is so-and-so with so-and-so. I'm like, okay. They're like, we're the leading provider of, and I'm like, stop. What do you know about my business? And when you can hear the clickety-clackety-click, oh, I know you're the CEO of the Bridge Group, game over.
Yeah.
But if I say, stop, maybe the intro wasn't perfect, stop, but what do you know about my business? They go, read your book, know your services business. I'm like, okay, go.
Yeah.
What do you got for me?
Then I'm decently, and I think the CMO of Lyft put it really eloquently when he said, if you want 15 minutes of my time, give me 5 of yours first by knowing who I am.
Oh, I love that.
And I'm like, that's a really good point, because it's like, and I'll give a negative example of how we've done that to the counter here of like, we all, mess up from time to time. There was a rep once upon a time who they said, like, I want to review this call with you. And I said, okay, well, let's start with who is this person? What is their business? And they said, it's Cardone Technologies. And I'm like, wait, say it again? And I'm like, wait, pause. We are a sales effectiveness software that helps you have better conversations and drive more quota as a result. Yep. Cardone Technologies is a trainer of a sales methodology. So I'm like, it doesn't mean that we couldn't fit in,
right?
But like, you need to build the use case and teach them something about their business that they didn't know, so that you help them within their job, the context of their job, kick more butt in their role in their day-to-day, and you have that reasoning in your head. So I think it kind of all flows together of like, reps are a lot more easy on a lot more easy on the line whenever they do know that, like, one reason, that 1, 2, 3 of how they think they could help you.
Yeah. It just gives you a comfort level and allows you to have that conversation. Nothing is worse than getting banted.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh my God, get a cold call and you start getting banted. It's like asking someone to show you their W-2 on a first date.
Absolutely.
Like, so nobody wants to hear that. So conversations, empathy, being human, being prepared. Yeah. I think those are all the key ingredients of how you launch a conversation.
Yeah, I'm going to add one more takeaway before we close out here. A takeaway that I have heard that has worked really well for me on the phone in the past is calling out the elephant in the room of what you think is going through their mind, because it communicates to them that you understand what they're saying and reading between the lines. So a good example is one of the counters of how we handle an objection over here at Chorus is if someone gives us what you would call like a false objection of like, hey, I'm running into a meeting and it's like 11:17 a.m. and you're like, what time's your meeting? 11:19. It's an objection, and we'll pattern interrupt by saying like, hey, can I level with you? I've been here, I'm running into a meeting a lot recently, and I get the feeling that's just your polite way of saying, go away, you annoying sales rep. Did I get that right? Yeah. And the reaction is bizarre. They're like laughing and they're like, yeah, you got that right. And we're like, because we're calling out like, hey, I hear you and what you're saying. You're giving me this objection of like, send me an email. It's like, well, and I've heard reps counter, well, what do you want me to include? And it's like, no, they're telling you. Yeah. They're telling you to leave. So I think all of that kind of ties in together of like being human on the phone with them, understanding what they're saying between the lines, and really taking the reins of that conversation and saying like, hey, I have a reason why I'm here. Yeah. And it's to help you do something better. And if you give me 30 seconds, I will tell you where I think we might be able to fit in and help you do something better in your day-to-day. You know what you just reminded me of with your 2 little fists? Yeah, my 2 tiny little... Taking the reins. I think that's another key ingredient in successfully executing a cold conversation. The seller needs to take the reins of that conversation and guide the buyer through it, and not just bob along reactively, hoping for the best. So I love that. Yeah. It's interesting. It's like salespeople, we get a bad rap of that there's no skill set. And I'm like, this skill set is the human language.
Yeah.
It's like understanding how to guide your buyer in a really productive way so that you understand where they're at and what pains they have and how can you alleviate those pains to your product. So I think it's the most interesting field to me because it's such a one-off, one-off case of like, I want to understand this situation. How can I have the EQ to guide in a better way? So that's it, everybody. Thank you for being a part of this session. And thank you, everyone, for showing up and watching these tips and takeaways on how to have a great cold call.